Hello and welcome to South Carolina Farm Bureau's installment of Voices of Agriculture. I'm your host, Reggie Hall. Coming up in this installment, we'll talk to South Carolina Farm Bureau President David Winkles, Government Relations Director Gary Spires. We'll hear from several state legislators about the importance of advocacy for agriculture, and we'll meet a few of South Carolina's brightest and best farmers. Each year at South Carolina Farm Bureau's annual meeting, President David Winkles addresses the crowd of about 1,200 farmers to give them the state of Farm Bureau. Let's listen now to some of the excerpts from his comments from the 2008 annual meeting.
I'm very proud of our members who represent you on the national level. Frances Price, our State Women's Committee Chair, was re-elected this year to serve another term on the AFBF Women's Leadership Committee. Frances is responsible for bringing the National Food Checkout Day celebration to South Carolina this year. Our Farm Bureau received statewide and national attention from the event. Thad and Jennifer Wembley represent you on the AFBF Young Farmer and Rancher Committee. In fact, our young farmers and ranchers continue to make a great showing in national leadership competitions. We have a bright future as they fill leadership positions at the county and state Farm Bureau levels here at home. Our Women's Committee also continues to be an active advocate of our organization through their county women's activities and especially through our youth leadership programs. It was a vision of mine as your president to provide a seamless transition from our youth programs to our collegiate programs, our YF&R program, our women's programs, and eventually on to county and state leadership positions. That vision is now becoming reality as we've seen Youth Leadership Conference participants fill leadership positions in this and other agricultural organizations. From a lobbying perspective, Farm Bureau continues to be second to none in being able to move the legislative needle. Our grassroots structure and your commitment to our legislative programs assure us that legislators hear our voice. The immigration battle last year was very divisive. There was a lot of misinformation out there, and many unfairly accused Farm Bureau of favoring illegal immigration. Of course, nothing could be further from the truth. Our lobbying efforts were conducted as directed by the policies passed by the voting delegates here last year. And while agriculture fared better than some, at the end of the day, the issue was a clear example of how quickly divided houses can fall to a vocal minority. I'm counting on your continued support of our policies and our legislative program as we move into the next legislative session, when we'll have to fight over water issues and possibly on tax and user fee increases. Your voice must be heard by your local legislators before our collective voice can make a difference at the State House.
There's nothing fresher, nothing finer than locally grown fruits and vegetables. They're tastier, sweeter, healthier, and most of us would agree they're better. That's why your South Carolina Department of Agriculture is working to make certified South Carolina grown produce and products available in stores in your neighborhood. Ask for South Carolina. Nothing's fresher, nothing's finer.
Like most of the 51 farm bureaus around the country, the South Carolina Farm Bureau Federation was founded in 1944 to amplify the voice of farmers and those living in rural lifestyles, to give them a voice in the halls of government here at the State House of South Carolina. Gary Spires is the director of South Carolina Farm Bureau's Government Relations Division. We caught up with him recently at the State House grounds to find out the issues that are on South Carolina's radar during the 2009 session of the legislature.
I always have environmental issues, and this year is no different. We have a bill that has been introduced in the Senate that will put a permitting program in place for surface water withdrawals. Agriculture is very dependent on water, and so we're greatly affected by it. There was a version that was introduced a couple of weeks ago. We've been working on a counter proposal, so to speak, with the other business interest, and that version will hopefully be meshed with the one that has been introduced. I think committee meetings will start very soon on that, and hopefully when it's all over with, we'll still be able to use our water and irrigate our crops and continue to provide all the great products we provide for the state of South Carolina. The way our system is now, and I think this is probably the most important part of the tax code as it affects agriculture, is the way our agriculture property is taxed. We tax at a 4% ratio, and it's done on ag use. In other words, it's not fair market value, but what the value is as it relates to producing crops. And and that's fair because, we pay local government our portion of taxes. We probably pay more in taxes than we get for services, because when you're in these rural areas, they don't provide garbage service or police protection or fire protection. So there's been some studies done, particularly in Florida, where the county is actually getting net gain off of agricultural land. And we feel like that's happening in South Carolina.
And while Farm Bureau's lobbying team is one of the most well-respected special interest teams in Columbia, they could not do their jobs without the collective voices of the men and women of the Farm Bureau from across the state.
We wouldn't be able to do near what we do at the state house or local level, at the federal level, without our grassroots. That's what makes Farm Bureau special. It's what makes Farm Bureau strong. And without that component, we would have problems. And so it is the most important key to our success.
Each year, scores of young farmers and ranchers come to the state capitol for an up-close and personal look at government in action. Young farmers and their spouses have a chance to talk with their local legislators and to impress upon them that there is a future in South Carolina's agricultural economy. Likewise, women leaders from across rural South Carolina also descend on the State House to call out their local legislators to express appreciation for their support and to explain issues that may affect the farm. Dressed in royal blue, it's hard to miss the impact the women make as lobbyists for the day. State leaders say farmers' days in Columbia are well spent and express just how good it is to see and hear from their constituents.
It's squeaky wheels that get attention on the farm. It's squeaky wheels that get attention in politics. And for people to be heard in the political process, they got to be squeaking. They got to make noise. Because it's just assumed if somebody isn't making noise that they're happy. And so I cannot emphasize enough. I had 6 years in Congress. I now have this experience in the executive branch. It's very, very important. If people want to be heard, they have to make themselves heard. That could mean an email to a legislator. It could mean showing up at a town hall meeting and saying, I disagree with you or I agree with you. It could be writing a letter. It could be making a phone call. It could be 1,001 different ways of making your voice heard, but the key is to actually go out and make your voice heard. Because without that, frankly, the system doesn't work.
The people that are listening to this can help us make those people come together when they take the time to write, or they see one of us at an event, it's a Farm Bureau event or whatever, and stop and say, look, I want to tell you what I think on so-and-so issue, or I think you ought to be doing this, or I think the state's going the wrong way, or I've got this problem, and the problem is a problem shared by others in our community.
Eyeball to eyeball. I would say that is your best point of contact for your elected representative, is eyeball to eyeball, where you can express yourself in no uncertain terms. Next, beyond that, it's always easy to pick up the phone and make a phone call.
Be involved in Farm Bureau. It's the only voice really that we have for agriculture in South Carolina that carries any clout. People do listen when you come as a Farm Bureau member, and I encourage all of your audience to be active participants and support your local candidates, support them, and stay in touch with them and let us know what your needs are so that we can meet them.
I would encourage your audience to understand the importance of their vote and of their role in advocating for a position. The Farm Bureau is only as strong as its membership. And what the membership has to understand, is that there is a responsibility on the part of the Farm Bureau membership to help the staff in Columbia deal with us. because we will accept it. It's harder for us to say no to a constituent.
I want to tell you thank you for what you do for South Carolina families, for making sure we have the food that we need, making sure that our economy stays as strong as it is, the good moral values that everybody knows farmers have. I mean, you guys are critically important to this state on a number of different levels, and if nobody said it to you lately, let me say it to you now. Thank you very, very much for what you do for the people of this state.
A key component of Farm Bureau's mission is advocacy, but that support cannot be given without the willingness of the grassroots to become educated about the issues, as well as the willingness to speak up to let their elected officials hear a clear voice for the clear choice of agriculture. Regardless of where you live, there's a Farm Bureau ready and willing to talk with you about joining their cause to keep food locally produced, abundant, affordable, and safe.
There's nothing fresher, nothing finer than locally grown fruits and vegetables. They're tastier, sweeter, healthier, and most of us would agree they're better. That's why your South Carolina Department of Agriculture is working to make certified South Carolina grown produce and products available in stores in your neighborhood. Ask for South Carolina. Nothing's fresher, nothing's finer.
Agriculture and forestry combine to make South Carolina's largest economic engine, producing $34 billion worth of income to the economy and almost 200,000 jobs a year. It's no wonder then that you'll find murals like this one all across South Carolina. We're here in the capital city of Columbia. It's also not unlikely that you'll find farmers who've dedicated their lives to farming and other farming and agricultural pursuits. One such person is Doug Stewart. He's the winner of South Carolina Farm Bureau's Distinguished Service Award. Ask people to describe this year's Farm Bureau Distinguished Service Award recipient, and they'll use words like humble, quiet, kind, patient, wise, and encouraging. He's a man of few words, and yet a man of great deeds. And that is what qualifies him for the honor bestowed upon him tonight. Doug Stewart was born in the old home place in Lawrence County, the house where he and his late wife Evelyn raised their two daughters, Peggy and Jane. Doug and Peggy continue to live there today in the five-generation Stewart home. Ask Mr. Doug how he got involved in farming, and he'll tell you he was born into it.
I was born in agriculture.
Like so many young people who reach their teens after growing up on the farm, Mr. Doug thought he had enough of farm life, so he went off to Clemson and said he wasn't coming back. But he did. His dad was a row crop farmer, mostly cotton. In his years on the farm, Mr. Doug grew cotton, soybeans, hogs, and dairy cows. Mr. Doug's the baby of 4 children. That may have something to do with his quiet demeanor. His siblings often got the best of him. In fact, it's told that when Doug was born, his sister said, "I don't want a red-headed brother, send him back." As stories go, there was always something going on around the Stewart house. A small building near the house served the community as what daughter Jane says was the first Walmart type of store in the Owings community.
And then there's this little building there beside it, and that was a general merchandise type store back then. I mean, it had the post office in it, it had a bank in it, it had the dress shop up top, it had like a miniature mini Walmart in it at one time.
During election season, the porch of the Stewart house served as the polling precinct, and in bad weather, the polls were moved into the living room. 1959 and 60 were big years in Mr. Doug's life. In 1959, his brother Rhett talked him into becoming a business partner.
The way I got involved in this was through my brother. He used to work at a milling company, and he decided he wanted to go out on his own. So he run this, and I public worked for 6 years till it could support both of us.
That was the same brother that managed to get him involved in the dairy business and the hog business. Apparently Rhett was a very persuasive big brother.
This dairy come open, and my brother talking about buying it, and he come to the field one morning when I was planting cotton, and said, "Doug, will you go into dairy business with me?" I said, "I don't know. I have to think this over." He said, "Okay." Well, about 2 hours later, he come back and said, "What'd you say?" I said, "I hadn't thought it." He said, "Well, I just want you to tell me you'll take care of the farming end of it." I said, "Buy it." So that's where we got in that.
Rhett's health was bad, and he died at the very young age of 35 in 1967. 1959 was a big year for Mr. Doug for another reason. It seems a local gal at a nearby high school, whom he'd known for about 15 years, was attending the same dance or social one evening. Mr. Doug married Miss Evelyn in December of 1960. They were married 37 years when she passed away in 1997. Around the same time Doug and Miss Evelyn married, an older farmer in the county invited Doug to a gathering of farmers. The group called themselves Farm Bureau. At that time, Mr. Doug was a part-time farmer, growing about 275 acres of cotton. He quickly got involved in the Lawrence County Farm Bureau, but when asked if he was involved in the Young Farmer and Rancher program, he said no.
I never was a young farmer because they said I was too old looking when I joined.
But that didn't stop him from becoming involved, or from assisting and advising other young farmers throughout the years.
Because he's all about trying to get the young kids, young people, young farmers. I've seen him take so many under his wing and try to lead them towards having successful careers and doing things that have really blossomed for them.
To learn to crawl before they try to walk. So you can't jump up here and buy everything you want at one time.
Mr. Doug Stewart proudly serves Farm Bureau as the Director-at-Large from the Piedmont District and as the perennial president of the Lawrence County Farm Bureau. In recent times, Mr. Doug has served as an AFBF voting delegate, chair of the Convention Study Committee, member of the Nominating Committee, and the Legislative Effectiveness Committee. He continues to work the farm, a lighter load now that he sold his dairy operation last spring.
I just made up my mind that that was it. In other words, I've been in it long enough. And I'm not getting any younger, they say.
What's going to keep you from getting back into the dairy business?
Because I sold all my equipment and all my milk cows.
Now he spends his time farming cotton, corn, timber, wheat, and pasture land, in addition to his daily work at the feed and seed store, which he and his brother started in 1959. The Better Services Milling Company and Distributors in the Owings community. Don't let his quiet demeanor fool you, though. Word has it Mr. Doug is a shrewd businessman and runs a highly competitive business.
I've been watching Doug for 20 to 25 years now as a sometimes begrudging competitor in business. Doug and I happen to both be in the farm supply business, and I can tell you he is a tough businessman. Pillar in the community, though, I think certainly describes Doug Stewart to a T.
Farm Bureau has grown to be an extended part of Doug Stewart's family.
It's a good organization. You got many benefits from it. Meet many friends across the state. And it's the organization that you can be proud of. And it's one of the strongest farm organizations. And they always got some kind of solution to help you with.
I'm 34 years old. I've been married for 9 years. Have 2 kids, 2 boys, 4 and 2, and I'm a 4th generation farmer. Here we have a dairy operation, which we have 600 cows. They're Holstein cows. We have a swine operation. We have a row crop operation, and we have a beef operation. and we farm about 3,000 acres. We do a good job of taking care of the animals to make sure they produce good quality milk. The main thing with milk is you want to make sure your cooling is very good. We just put in what we call a cooling system. It's called a chiller, and our milk comes out of the cow at about 100 degrees. It goes through some refrigerated pipes, and it brings it down to about 45 degrees. And then it goes into our bulk milk tank, our 5,000 gallon bulk milk tank. And then we have compressors on that tank, and it will cool the milk down to about 35 degrees. And then I have a test kit in there that I actually test the milk myself to make sure there's no antibiotics in our milk. The milk truck comes, and he also gets a sample and takes it to the lab. At the lab, they run the sample, and they're checking for, quality, whether there's something milk cooling problem or a antibiotic problem. If anything shows up in their test, it's immediately done. I've always known I wanted to farm. That's what I want to do. I love what I do, and I love farming. Yes, this is in my blood. The thought of doing something else never crossed my mind. So I've always been happy farming, and I just enjoy doing it.
Well, our time's out for this episode of South Carolina Farm Bureau's episode of Voices of Agriculture. Thanks so much for watching. If you're interested in any of the topics we covered during today's show, we invite you to log on to www.scfb.org for more information about Farm Bureau and Farm Bureau activities. Become an advocate for agriculture today. Get involved in your local Farm Bureau. Thanks for watching. I'm your host, Reggie Hall.